Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ricardo. I am an astrophotographer. I have been doing the hobby for about 2 years now, and today we're gonna edit some photos. I'm gonna talk a little bit about my workflow as well as where this was taken and what gear I was using. Alright, so talking about gear, I'm using for my lens a Sigma 14mm f1.8 f-mount lens, and I'm using the FTZ adapter to adapt it to my Nikon Z7. So this is the original Nikon Z7. It has been astro modified by Kalari Vision, and I am using a Kalari Vision clip-in light pollution filter as well to combat a little bit of the afterglow and the pollution coming from New York City. This was shot on a tripod and a ball head. I am not using my star tracker for this one, and the reason being is I want to show you that you can still get really good results without a star tracker. You just need the right lens, the right camera, and a really dark sky. Now, as far as how many shots were used to make this, we have 12 light frames and 20 dark frames, all shot at 10 seconds, ISO 4000, wide open at f1.8 on the Sigma. And the foreground was shot with the Sigma as well, obviously in portrait mode, but they were 4 light frames, different ISO values, different f-stops, and different exposure times so that I could just get a lot more light in for the foreground. What I'm going to do with those is I'm going to turn the foreground into an HDR, stack the sky, bring it all together, and try to make it look presentable. Okay, so the first thing I like to do is I like to grab all the photos and I want to do a little bit of editing and a little bit of correcting. So I'm going to import them to Lightroom. 36 photos, going in, boom. Get rid of this folder for a second, make this a little bit bigger. And now you see I'm importing all the frames in. Alright, now that everything's in, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the lens correction. So you pick a photo. Since they all were shot with the same lens, we're going to go down here, enable lens corrections, change profile. We're going to go to Sigma, 14mm f1.8, boom. Go back to look at all of them. You see it's much brighter. So if we click on it and compare it to the original, vignetting kind of gone. Alright, so now when we go here, we're going to copy the settings, Control C. Then we're going to do Control A, we're not going to touch the original. Then Control V to paste them. It's going to paste the same settings to the remaining 35 photos. So now what we have is everything is corrected. And from there on, we can edit the foreground separately. We can leave the darks alone, and then we can edit the sky before we go and stack them. And I do that because sometimes you want to bring just a tiny little bit of detail out before you stack the photos. Some people claim that you should not do that. I've tried both methods. Sometimes not touching the photos and stacking them first makes more sense, but generally I always put them through Lightroom before I go to Sequator. Okay, once in Lightroom, I'm gonna open up one of the light frames. And as you can see, once you zoom in, you're going to notice that at the center wide open, we have fair sharpness, but we have noise. And we have this. This must have been either a satellite, a shooting star, or a plane. Obviously from far, you don't see much. And at the corners here, extreme corners, you see some crazy amount of trailing and distortion. And it's visible at the bottom as well, but that's fine because we're not going to use the entire image. We're literally just going to cut it up into pieces and just put things together. The reason why I want to bring up some of the exposure here is because I want more detail. We're going to get rid of a lot of the noise anyways. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring the whites up a little bit. We're going to bring the highlights down. So original versus something like that. Now we're going to bring the shadows down a little more, and as you can see, it looks like there's a little more color, a little more contrast. I don't really like touching the contrast much. I'm going to bring up the sky a little bit more. It's still too bright, so maybe bring the whites down just about there. I think that looks about right. In terms of the white balance, I'm gonna leave that for later. What I really want to focus on is just bringing out more details. So here you see a lot of light in the bottom, and now that we did a little bit of editing, you see a little more detail here, but then this looks very yellowish. We got to work on that. So on the yellows, we're gonna bring the saturation down just a little bit. Now, one other thing that I may want to do is play around with the dehaze. Now that's crazy. So maybe just a little bit down. I don't really like to mess with this too much, so bring it up to like 7. Let's see, 5. Looks a little bit better now. Gotta really work on those colors. Bring the darks up a little bit so nothing is completely black and there's no highlights. So if I turn these on, you can see you can blow out your highlights or the darks. So I'm gonna keep it right in the middle. I'm gonna bring this down a tiny little bit more and just kind of leave it there. So now, original, edited. I'm gonna take that, copy those settings, and paste it onto the rest of my images. I'm gonna keep working on the color balance, but at least now I got all the light frames edited. And if we were to export them right now as TIFF files, I could get a pretty good idea of what they look like. And as you can see, still kind of light, but the contrast is not that heavy. It's not crunchy. The colors are not oversaturated. It looks okay for now. So I had to change the colors on my desktop because I had everything set up to look very yellowish. So I got the colors back to neutral. So now we can see the color of the image, and you can see that there's a lot of purple and blue here. And although it looks cool and artistic, a lot of people will say that that's not the true color of the night sky. So how do we get kind of close to it and still have a little bit of our own choice of colors? Well, what I do is, well, one thing, I'm gonna bring up the temperature up a little bit. So +6, looks a little yellow, but let's see what happens. Then I'm gonna bring the tint down towards green. Let's see, -7, no, that's too much. Okay, that, see. All right, so the sky does not look as purple as it did before. It looks a little bit better. Let me see. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. Still see a little bit of purple, still see a little bit of blue, but it just doesn't look as blue as before. As much as I would like to leave it that way, that's really not accurate. You can bring the saturation down a little bit, so make it a little grayer, but I leave it the same. Okay, so one thing I'm starting to see is the sky's still really bright. I don't know if I want to leave it that way. I may change it later. Let's see what happens when I bring down the whites. Maybe bring this down a little bit more. There you go. So now that I got the finished edit here, you can clearly see this is the original one before when I was editing just, the exposure. But once I got the colors, I made it a little more green. So you could go with something like this if that's what you like. I kind of like this one a little bit more. Maybe I'll take some of the greens out. -14. We're gonna bring it to -12 instead. Looks a little bit better. I'm gonna copy the settings, and then I'm gonna paste them onto the remaining images. Control V. Cool. So now I have the same image all across. Looks all right. My dark frames, they're gonna remain that way. And now we're going to go into the foreground. So I have clipping turned on, so you can see the highlights are a little bit crazy there, but we'll see what happens. We'll bring this down a tiny little bit. And right here, you can see the darks. So bring that up a little bit. So now original versus the edit. I'm gonna take those minimal settings and paste them onto the other images. Now remember, they're shot at different values, so I'm gonna have to make adjustments. For instance, here, ISO 5000, f2.2, 20 seconds. Look at that. ISO 6400, f1.8, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds. So they're all over the place. So you got to kind of play around with that. What we're going to do is we're going to grab these, select all of them, select photo merge, HDR merge. Now it's going to try to create an HDR image, and we'll see what it looks like. And I'm probably going to need to edit a lot there. Okay, so this is what I got. Now the apply auto settings will basically create an HDR with a certain value, and you can still play around with it and move it around. So generally I just pick that. Now I don't always do that. For this case, I'm just gonna go with the easiest way to edit. So we're gonna merge them into an HDR photo. Here we are. I'm gonna open this. It is too bright and the colors look terrible. So gonna see, look at that. We're gonna bring the shadows down a little bit. Highlights are pretty good, but the exposure's at 93, so I'm gonna bring that down a little bit. There you go. Somewhere's like that. Now I'm kind of worried. I'm clipping here, but this is a really dark side of the image. So we'll come back to that. We're gonna lift the blacks a little bit. Now we got rid of that clipping. Still very noisy though. See little pockets over there clipping again. But for the most part, except for those really bright light sources, it looks much better now. The Milky Way looks terrible, but that's okay because we're gonna use the sky for the other one. Bring the highlights down a little bit. No more clipping, no more clipping here. We're good. So far, so good. All right. Now, since I don't really care about the sky, and I'm gonna get rid of that anyways, it doesn't really matter what that looks like in this edit. I'm gonna put blending over here and color grading at 100, and I'm going to bring the highlights down a tiny little bit. The mid-tones up a little bit. Again, these are all just tiny little edits in each direction to get the photo to look better. And let's see, color noise, that's fine. We're gonna do a little bit of noise reduction. So let's look what happens. No noise reduction, plus 33, plus 20. Let's see, 0 and then 20. Okay, looks all right. Let's see, are we losing a lot of detail? We kind of are. Maybe down to 10. Okay, original, edit. Okay, so we're gonna create a brush. No thanks. Okay, and for this brush I'm going to do about 50% feathering, flow at 100, and we're gonna start painting. And we're just gonna work on the foreground. Even if you go over the lines, it's okay because you're gonna cut out the sky later. And then now that I have that, I'm going to do, let's see, whites. I'm gonna bring those up. And we want the amount at 100, at least I do. In some cases you may not. And so you can bring more lights. I'm gonna bring these as high as I can within reason and bring some of these highlights down. I'm also going to give it a little more texture and sharpen it a little bit. And as far as the clarity, I'm not sure if I want to do that yet. That's too much. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave it there, and you can see the layer mask on here. So now, compared to the original one, we've been able to recover a lot of light. We can see some buildings out here, homes, all that good stuff, right? So in order to keep the white balance from looking too crazy, I am going to make it a little more yellow. So we're gonna go to maybe, let's see. No, that's too much. All right, so the tint, we're gonna bring it to like minus 55, minus 59. Bring this up a little bit more. And now I'm kind of gonna want to compare. So how does this look compared to the other photos I was just editing, which should be here and should be this. What was I using here? Plus 10, minus 12. Let's try those settings. Although I don't think that's gonna be a great idea, but we can give it a shot. You know what? We'll just do this for now. I think that looks okay. Now I usually like to check what it looks like exported. Looks okay. Okay, now that I got the foreground kind of ready, we're going to export it. So now we have an HDR that we are exporting, and I'm gonna save it as a TIFF file. Now we got this 256.2 megabyte file that's ginormous, and I'm going to save that. So we are going to save this in my desktop, and there we go. I'm gonna give that a little bit of time. That should be done now. Let's see, desktop. There we go. And that is our TIFF file right now. So that's our foreground. We are nowhere near done yet, but we got that part done. All right, now we're gonna go back to the 36 images that we were doing before. We're gonna grab all these dark frames and we're gonna save them as TIFF files also. That's gonna be 20 of these. And basically what we're doing is we are preparing to go and stack all this. So there we go, TIFF file 260 megabytes, boom, we're gonna save them. We're gonna cut to the end so that way I don't waste your time. Okay, now that we imported those dark frames, we're gonna take these light frames and do the same, save them as TIFF files. We're gonna take these 12 photos, we're gonna export them as well. Now one thing, if you're using, depending on which version of Lightroom that you're using, remember to make them full size, 16 bits, no compression, TIFF file. Otherwise, if you're picking, to compress the photo or a lower quality, you might not get the results that you're after. So now we're gonna go ahead and export these. They should be done soon. So we're gonna minimize this. Now you see them all popping up here on my desktop. Pretty much ready to go. We're gonna open up Sequitur. I'm gonna make this window a little bit smaller like that, just so I can see the photos. And now I'm going to grab all my light frames, which are right here, plus these three. Here we go. Drag them here, star images. There you go. Now you can click on base image here and then go look for the exact image that you want to use as the base image. But generally, I don't really pay too much attention to that unless I see star trails on the base image. Now we are going to grab your dark frames right here. Whoa. There we go. Oh, what's going on? What's going on? Did I just copy everything? Yeah, let's not do that. Okay. I should have put these in a folder, but I guess I'm being lazy. There you go. Noise images. The output, we will pick the desktop and we will name it Stacked Sky version 1.0. And we'll see what happens. So save. Now I am going to take accumulation. I don't know if this is going to work perfectly. It might give me a lot of trailing. I might have to do it a little bit different, but we'll try this one first. And you're going to go to composition align stars, select best pixels, and you're going to put it to strict. Sky region is going to be full area. You're going to select reduce distortion effects. Leave it as complex if that's what's originally going to be there. Remove dynamic noises. High dynamic range. Brightness. Now with these, I'm going to click stack and we'll see what we get. And then from there on in, we're going to make adjustments. Okay, so the photo is about to be ready. We are good, and this is the result. So as you can see here, this is our stacked result, right? This is just one of those single frames. Now, if you look at both of them side by side, it seems like the colors changed a little bit. But in my opinion, I see less contrast in the stacked photo. Now, when we go here, you can see on the right is my stacked photo, on the left is my single exposure. And for example, if we zoom in really close here, you see how much noise you just reduced by stacking the photo. So now you have a much cleaner, even the skies, even though they look a little blurry, but they do look a little bit cleaner as well. So I think that's a good first try. Now we can do enhance starlight, reduce light pollution, and it'll give you some, considerable changes, although sometimes they can be very drastic. So we'll rename this. We're gonna go back here, stack sky, but instead of 1.0, we're gonna name it 1.1. Because I kind of like the result that we just got. And so I don't know if by enhancing the starlight, we're going to pick the strongest setting, and light pollution, we're going to pick the uneven, weakest setting, and we're going to make it go. And I'm curious to see if the photo is still going to look just as good, or if it's going to look really bad. Sometimes when you reduce light pollution, it kind of looks like you're dehazing in Lightroom, and it looks really, really fake. So we're gonna give this another shot and see what we get in result. Cool, so check it out. That's a lot darker. So one thing I want to compare is the two photographs next to each other. Should I go with the original one? Should I go with the second one? Let's see. Okay, so this is the original one. This is the one with the enhanced light for the stars and with the light pollution removal. I don't know. I don't like it. It does look darker, but I can achieve something like this in Lightroom. So why even use it? So I'm going to go with version 1.0. We're going to close this because we don't need it anymore. If you want, you can literally grab all these files and delete them. Personally, I have already edited this photo before, so I don't really need all these files taking up space in my computer. But for you, you might want to put them in a hard drive and save them. So now I got the foreground and then two different alternatives. We don't need Lightroom anymore. I'm going to close it for now. Okay, now that we opened Photoshop, we are going to go to File, Scripts, load files into a stack, click Browse, select the photos that you want to edit, click OK. You don't have to automatically align them, and that is because if you think about it, the sky image was shot at one time of the night and the foreground at another. So if you pay attention here, the Milky Way looks like it's more on the left side of the screen, but then if you look at the stacked image, it's more towards the center. So there's no point to align them. With this selected, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to select, so Control, and then click on every image, and I'm going to duplicate the layers. Now I got copies, so if I make mistakes, I should be okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the zoom tool, and I'm going to zoom out so I can see the photo from afar. I am going to click on the crop tool and crop out so as to make more space to be able to move all the photos around. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to click on the select tool again. I'm going to turn off the layers in the sky and just focus on this. I'm going to bring the foreground down. Next thing, I'm going to go right here to the quick selection tool. Now you have different ways to do it, but quick selection tool is what works best for me. And first we're going to zoom back in. So we're going to click the zoom tool and then fit on screen. Go back to the quick selection tool, and I'm going to select the sky and file. Nope, I'm lying. Edit, cut. Okay. Then you're going to click Control D so that you can unselect everything, and now you just have a foreground. Now I'm going to select the sky layers again and see which one I liked. So this was the darker one. I can go over here to move tool, move it around, and kind of get it in the center like it was supposed to be. Now, it doesn't look bad, but honestly, I think I like this one more. What do you think? Really dark sky, really bright foreground. I don't know about that. Or slightly brighter sky, and then we can darken up the foreground. So I think I'm going to go with that. So we're going to do this. And so now if you think about it, I'm going to lift this up a little bit. Look, the river, let me close up. The river's right here, which is this right here. This little brightness here is these buildings here. So if I just bring it just close enough like that, maybe a little further down, I just made room. I can actually move it around, and I will, because if you notice up here, we still got the dark trees, which is this from the other image. So not 100% accurate with the alignment of the sky at that moment, but the sky did look like that at one point. If you look at this image right here, you saw that the Milky Way was on the left. So getting it in the middle would be a good idea. So we're going to go back to this, and there we go. So it looks pretty decent to me. We're going to go back to the zoom tool. We're going to fit it onto the screen, and that doesn't look bad. Now I'm gonna crop again. So now I'm going to come in, crop it out, crop all that stuff out of the way, and like that. And now I have a composite image that looks kind of cool. Still not sharp, still not 100%. I mean, you still need to edit it, obviously. You still need to do a lot of work, if I'm being honest. So one thing I'll do is I will turn off the foreground because we are still working with the sky. Now, when it comes to that, the first thing I'm going to do is Control L. And I'm going to darken the sky up a little bit. Like that. I don't know if I want to make it brighter. Maybe like that. I think that looks okay. Previous one, kind of bright, a little bit darker. So that's why I told you, you can achieve those results so you don't have to use a picture like this. So we're going to bring this guy back in, okay. It's kind of in the middle. The foreground looks a little too bright. So we're going to do Control L again, but now on the foreground. And we are actually going to darken it a little bit. Like that. So now, again, this looks a lot better than it did before. If we actually go back and look at these two, because we agreed that we were going to work on these two, look at the difference. Well, look at the difference in the sky, and look at the difference in the foreground. A lot better. The white balance, you can still work on that later, but now you have an image. So now I'm going to take all these old ones, delete those for now, because I pretty much got a winning photo. Now I'm going to crop it in a little bit more because I don't like the way that the corners came out. There's a little too much distortion, so I'm going to crop that in a little bit more, like that. Looks okay to me. And I'm going to select both, so Control, and then pick both photos. I'm going to merge the layers into one. Now I am going to start playing around a little more. So first thing I'm going to do is I am going to go to Adjustments. I'm going to click on, let's see, Set Vibrance. I'm going to bring that up a little bit. I'm also going to now go back here to my quick selection tool, and I'm going to select the sky again. I'm going to go to Filters, Dust and Scratches, and now we can play around with that. So this is what the original sky looks like. And then if you look here, you're getting rid of some stars. It depends how zoomed in you are and how much noise your image has, but you can go from here down to here. Remove a couple of stars, click OK, Control D so that you can unselect. Now you have a slightly cleaner sky. We're gonna merge these again. I still don't like the foreground, so I'm gonna select the foreground. Whoa. Okay, like that. And I'm going to click Adjustments, Exposure, and I'm gonna bring the exposure up a little bit more. Plus 17. Merge the layers again. And I have an OK photo. I'm going to select File, Save As. We're going to save it as Stacked Sky PSV 1.0. So Photoshop basically. And it saves it as a TIFF file. So now it's done. Let's open it. Let's see what that looks like. Not bad. And from here, you can bring it back into Lightroom and edit it as much as you want. You can change the white balance. You can play around with the foreground. You can sharpen up the trees and, you know, this little ledge here. You can darken the Milky Way as much as you want, or you can make it as crunchy and as sharp as possible, although I like the little blurry style more. But that's pretty much how you make a photo. I hope you liked it. If you liked my video, follow me. I'm gonna have a lot more ready for you guys.